Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into one of the worst gigs in medieval history. Forget dragons, plagues, or sewage in the streets at night. You're the town's executioner. You stand under a grey sky in the muddy square, a heavy axe in hand, and dozens of eyes staring at the back of your head like it's a target. The condemned man kneels in front of you, trembling. You try not to notice the smell of fear, or is that your own sweat? Either way, welcome to your shift. And just so you know, you probably won't survive this, if not physically, then emotionally, or socially, or reputationally. Pick your poison. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video, and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've just been given a job no one wants, but everyone needs. There was no interview, no congrats, you got it. Email. Most likely you were volunteered. Maybe your father was the executioner. Maybe you were the town's tanner, and someone said, hey, already smells bad and works with knives. Maybe you committed a crime and got this job instead of hanging for it. Yay, right now you're standing in the very heart of your town, the marketplace. People are selling apples to your left, live chickens to your right, and somewhere behind you, a drunk guy is yelling that his cousin doesn't deserve this. You steel your nerves. You do this every few weeks, but somehow it doesn't get easier. You wipe your hands on your apron, worn and stained, the leather stiff with years of use. You're not sure if it's dried blood or just time doing its thing. It's not just the act that's hard, it's everything around it. Being the executioner means you're a living contradiction, essential but reviled, employed by the law but considered untouchable. When you walk down the street, people step aside, but not out of respect, out of fear, out of disgust. You nod at the baker, and he pretends not to see you. Kids throw rocks when you're not looking. Your house is at the edge of town, probably near the cemetery, because let's be honest, hood want to be your neighbor. But today's a job day. A man's been sentenced to death, and you're here to carry it out. You've sharpened your blade last night, carefully, precisely, that part, at least, you're proud of. Historians say executioners were usually meticulous with their weapons because it wasn't just about ending a life. It was about doing it cleanly, publicly, and without turning the whole thing into a trauma circus. At least, not more than necessary. You step forward. The crowd holds its breath. You lift the axe and aim for the soft, vulnerable curve between neck and spine. But here's a secret. It's not always that easy. Sometimes the condemned flinch. Sometimes your arm isn't in top form. Sometimes the axe doesn't go all the way through. And then, well, then you pray the second swing is faster. Your heart races. You do the job. One clean blow. Mostly. The head rolls metaphorically, and sometimes literally, and the crowd gasps. Then silence. Then, weirdly, a kind of applause that might haunt you later. Afterward, you drag the body away. You don't get a standing ovation. You get glares, murmurs. Someone spits near your feet. It's like being a janitor for human justice, cleaning up what others can't even stomach thinking about. And that's just the visible part of the iceberg. You're probably wondering, why do people hate you so much? You're just enforcing the law. You didn't choose the sentence. You didn't write the crime code. You didn't invent public decapitations. But in the eyes of the public, you're the one who turned justice into spectacle. You're the one who ended a life. That guilt, that anger, that discomfort, it all lands on your shoulders. Not the judges, not the sheriffs, just yours. Let's pause and toss in a fun historical tidbit. In some German towns, executioners had to live in designated houses called Scharfrichtigers, literally executioner houses. They were built on the edge of town or right next to cemeteries, because obviously, nothing says good neighbor like being near both death and rotting memories. Oh, and there's this delightful fringe belief too. People thought touching you would curse them, that your very skin carried some kind of moral contamination. You'd think this was limited to superstition-riddled backwaters, but nope, some quite advanced cities kept that belief well into the 1600s. Of course, historians still argue whether executioners truly were social outcasts across all of medieval Europe, or just in certain regions. Some say they lived totally separate lives. Others suggest some executioners managed to gain odd celebrity status, respected, even feared. but not always hated. You're probably not feeling the respect part just yet. You trudge home as the sun sets, another day's work done, blood on your apron and silence in your ears. You pass a couple on the road, they turn their backs, pulling their children away like you're some kind of plague in boots. At home, you remove your boots, your gear, and your dignity. You sit by the fire, trying to eat bread that tastes faintly of ash, not because it's burnt, because everything does. Your hands tremble. Your mind replays the scene, not the part where you swung, but the part where the man looked up at you and whispered something. You don't remember the words, only the look. People think executioners sleep like babies. Truth is, most of you don't sleep at all. But hey, chin up. There's always next week. You wake up before dawn, not because you want to, but because sleep only comes in slices now. Dreamless or haunted, rarely anything in between. Outside your window, the mist still clings to the ground like a guilty conscience. You stretch, crack your neck, and try to forget the weight of yesterday's blade. Today isn't an execution day, but that doesn't mean it's peaceful. You step into the muddy street, already feeling the familiar cold prickle of eyes on your back. You are the town's unwanted centerpiece. Everyone knows you, no one greets you. They don't forget your face, but they wish they could. You walk toward the well for water, and people clear a path like you're radioactive. A mother pulls her child behind her, whispering something fast and urgent. You catch a glimpse of the little girl peeking from behind her mother's skirts, eyes wide, equal parts curious and terrified. You nod, she blinks, then she hides again. Being the executioner means you live in a social limbo, not fully a citizen, not quite an exile. People rely on you, need you, even beg for your services sometimes, but only from a safe emotional distance. You're their moral outsourcing. They want justice, they want peace of mind, but they don't want to know the person who delivers it. You're the walking embodiment of violence they don't want to think about. There's a strange paradox here. In medieval towns, executioners were often treated like criminals without ever committing a crime. They were marked not by sin, but by function. You didn't choose the role, but the role chooses how everyone sees you. And spoiler, they don't see a person. Here's your morning routine. Get water. Avoid direct eye contact. Try not to hear the murmurs. They call you things like Death's Pet, the Red Hand, or Axe Whisperer. None of them are compliments. You try to buy bread at the market. The baker hesitates, holds the loaf out with tongs like you're contagious. You drop coins into a bucket beside the stall. He won't take them by hand. When you leave, he pours vinegar into it. Nice. You return home, loaf under your arm, and wonder if you even tasted the last one. You live on the fringes of town, not just geographically. Your house is modest stone walls, a sagging roof, and a door that creaks like it, too, has seen things it wishes it could forget. A cat sits by your doorstep. It's the only creature that doesn't flinch when you approach. You scratch its ears. For a second, you feel like someone normal. Then you remember, you're not. And socializing. Good luck. You're not invited to parties, weddings, or even funerals. No one will marry you unless they're desperate, or from a long line of executioners too. That's a thing, by the way. Executioner families. Whole lineages marked by the sword. Historians still argue whether these families were respected in their own right, or just conveniently tolerated. Either way, you're born into it and rarely outgrow it. Take a moment to enjoy this charming historical tidbit. In some regions, executioners had their own little social circles among each other. When they traveled to festivals or fairs, they met other executioners, swapped stories, compared tools, maybe even laughed. You know, the usual small talk. Except everyone involved has chopped someone's head off at least once. But outside that niche circle, you're alone. You pass the tavern. The music sounds tempting. You consider stopping in, but you know better. Last time you entered, the entire place fell silent. No one talked until you left. One guy muttered, "Bad luck," and spat under his bench. You drank alone, then left a full mug untouched. Even the barmaid avoided your gaze. Want a drink? Sure. Home. That doesn't mean you're totally isolated. Sometimes people come to you quietly, of course, at night, knock on your door. They want favors, small jobs, illegal things. Sometimes it's, can you rough someone up? Sometimes it's weirder. Once, a merchant wanted you to curse his business rival, because apparently you're also the town's unofficial boogeyman now. You declined, but now he avoids eye contact too. probably thinks you cursed him by accident. You try to make peace with your place in the world. Some executioners turn to religion, others turn to drink. A few embrace the role with eerie pride, or you're just trying to get by without breaking. Inside, at the edge of your yard, someone's left something again, a dead chicken. No note, just the offering. Some folks think giving the executioner a gift keeps death away from their door. You sigh, you bury it. The cat watches, unimpressed. There's a strange thing about your identity. No matter how clean your hands are that day, they always feel stained. Even if you spend a week doing nothing but mending your tools or cleaning the yard, the smell of blood lingers like a rumor. You sit under your porch that evening, watching the village. A couple walks by, hand in hand. A boy chases a hoop with a stick. For a second, everything feels normal, but then someone yells in the square, "Thief!" A crowd gathers fast, like smoke. You stay seated. You're not summoned. Not this time. But you watch. You listen. The town handles it. A few punches, a shouted warning. It disperses. Yet a part of you knows, next time, if they don't let the guy go, you'll be the one asked to finish the story, and no one will look you in the eye afterward. You wake to knocking sharp, insistent. It's not dawn yet, but something tells you this is a bring your axe kind of morning. You open the door to find a guard waiting. Expression stiff. He doesn't say hello, just nods and grunts. You're needed. No one ever says what for. You already know. It's not because you're late on your taxes. You grab your rack's hood, and that heavy leather coat that still smells like iron and ash. You don't rush. There's no dignity in the work, but there's ritual. You always move with control, precision, like a craftsman, because believe it or not, there's a certain skill to this if you care about not making a horrifying mess. Except, nobody trained you. There was no apprenticeship, no formal education. You didn't sit in a class labeled Efficient Decapitation 101. If you were lucky, you had a father, uncle, or cousin who did the job before you and showed you the ropes. If you weren't, you guessed, practiced on pigs, maybe watched a few floggings and hoped you'd never botch the real thing. Most don't talk about this, but the early days are the worst. You remember your first beheading, the way your hands trembled, the silence before the blow, and worse, the silence after. The moment you realized you didn't quite get it right. The axe caught on something, slid off to the side, and you had to strike again. In front of everyone, historians still debate how common this kind of messy execution was. Some records suggest that many new executioners bungled their early attempts. Others argue the state would often delay hiring until a skilled hand could be found. But you remember it like it happened 5 minutes ago, and so do the townspeople. A botched execution wasn't just embarrassing. It was dangerous. It could spark riots, damage your reputation, whatever that means for a pariah. In some rare cases, it got you killed. There's a tale out of France early 14th century, where a crowd tore apart an inexperienced headsman after he turned a noble's beheading into a bloody, drawn-out horror. You learned fast after that. Now, as you walk toward the square, you remind yourself of everything. Grip the handle low. Raise your shoulders to align the swing. Steady the feet. You focus on details because no one gave you a manual, just the expectation. Do it right, not for justice, not for mercy. Just clean your axe is a two-hander, double-edged, slightly chipped along one blade. You sharpened it yesterday. You sharpen it almost daily. Really, the weight has become part of your body, like a fifth limb made of steel and silence. Funny thing, every executioner develops preferences. Some use swords, especially in places like England, where noble beheadings were more of a show. Others used axes, or even massive curved blades that require both hands and prayer. Rope is more common in towns that can afford proper gallows and someone to build them right. You've tried rope before, hated it. Too many variables, knot tightness, neck angle, the prisoner's weight. One wrong estimate, and the person twitches for far too long. A fringe tidbit here there are records of executioners in 16th century Germany using swords made specifically for decapitation, called executioners' swords, blunt-tipped, broad, and ceremonial. They were beautiful and terrifying. Some even had religious inscriptions. You think about that sometimes, how the people who called you cursed would still give your blade a blessing. The town square's filling up. Word travels fast. You step up onto the scaffold and see today's condemned. A man in his 30s, thin hands tied. He's murmuring to himself, maybe a prayer, maybe just his name, trying to hold on to something real before it's gone. There's no rehearsal, no second take. You check the blockwood worn down from hundreds of past jobs, you adjust it slightly, it's all instinct now. No training, but years of practice. That's the only education the job ever gave you. Repetition. The man kneels. The crowd goes quiet. You wonder, do they realize how little you were taught? How this entire system of life and death rests on you guessing. Right for the first year or two? Probably not. You step forward, blade rising. You count 1, 2, 3 on swing. It's clean. The head rolls. The crowd gasps. And somewhere in your chest, your heart finally exhales. Afterward, there's no applause, no handshake. The guards haul the body away, and someone tosses a dirty cloth at you. You wipe the blade in silence. You pass through the dispersing crowd. A few people nod, but it's not approval. It's relief they're not the one on the scaffold. One man mutters something like "good swing," but won't meet your eyes. You walk home, arms sore, body heavy. You remember how long it took you to get good at this, and you wonder how many did you hurt in the learning. That's the irony. You're expected to be perfect, but no one ever teaches you how. Your axe leans against the corner of the room, drying blood wiped clean, but never fully gone. You see it even when it's not there. That dull silver flash, the notched edge, the way it sings through the air like it remembers every scream. It's ever silenced that you sit down at your table, arms sore, back aching. You didn't just carry out a sentence. Today you carried weight. The blade, the crowd, the memory, all of it settles on your shoulders like a cloak. You can't take off. Let's talk about tools. Everyone thinks it's just an axe. Simple, brutal, final, but your tools are more than weapons. They're symbols. They're the line between law and chaos, between ritual and murder. And there's more to the kit than just the blade. In the corner beside the axe is the whetstone. You use it daily, not just because the blade dulls quickly, but because it keeps your hands busy on the days you're not executing. Sharpening is meditative, rhythmic, a sound you've come to associate with safety. It's when things go quiet that your thoughts get dangerous. Then there's the rope, frayed, twisted, coiled like a sleeping snake. Hanging isn't always your first choice, but sometimes it's the cheaper option. No scaffold to clean, no blood to mop, just a trapdoor and a prayer. You've learned how to tie a proper hangman's knot, how to measure a man's weight against the drop. A miscalculation can mean a slow, choking death or a head popping clean off the shoulders like a cork. Neither is ideal. Historians still debate whether executioners of your time were deeply trained in anatomy. Some say yes, they had to know how much pressure it took to break a spine or sever a neck. Others argue you were more of an improviser, learning through trial, error, and the occasional scandal. You suspect the truth is somewhere in the middle. You've learned where the spine curves, where the jugular pulses, not from books but from experience, gruesome, repetitive experience. A lesser-known tool sits in a locked chest under your bed, the branding iron. You don't use it often, but it's part of the job. Marking thieves, adulterers, deserters. Each crime has its own symbol. Some towns use letters T for thief, V for vagabond. Others use shapes, more abstract but equally permanent. A curved S for shame, burned into the cheek or palm. You'll never forget the smell of it. Burning skin is a scent that lodges in the back of your throat. Stubborn and acidic. And torture-girious. You have some of that too, not your favorite. Part of the gig, but again, no one else wants to do it. You've got thumbscrews, leg irons, and a rack that's mostly for show, now rarely used, but cleaned regularly. Because if it ever comes back into fashion, and let's face it, it always does, you'll be expected to know how it works. No manual, just instinct. Fringe tidbit for you. In some parts of Europe, executioners had to maintain their own set of torture instruments, like a blacksmith maintaining his hammer and anvil. In fact, there are records of executioners being fined if their gear wasn't clean or presentable. Because yes, public torture was also supposed to look professional. You wonder who wrote that rule. And then there's the costume. Not a full outfit, per se, but certain pieces that mark you. The black hood, not always standard. That came later, and mostly in stories. What you usually wear is a long coat, sturdy leather, sometimes dyed black or dark brown. It's meant to be practical, protects against mess, hides the wear and tear. Boots thick enough to withstand blood pooling on wooden floors. Gloves, if you're lucky though, bare hands are more common. Easier to clean than cloth. Strangely enough, there's a knife strapped to your hip, but it's not for defense. It's for precision cutting rope, removing heads cleanly when the axe doesn't finish the job, or even carving out tongues in particularly dark sentences. That one rare, but it's on the books. You don't name your tools. That's a line you won't cross. You've heard stories of other executioners who did. Old Biter the axe, the whisper for a dagger. You think giving them names gives them too much power. Better they stay objects, things to use, not companions. Sometimes, at night, you clean everything again, not because they're dirty, but because it makes the world feel a little more ordered. You scrape away rust, oil the hinges, check the rope's knots. It's your version of a lullaby. Historians believe that some executioners took intense pride in their tools, crafted custom handles, carved symbols into the blade, even carried ornate whetstones passed down like heirlooms. You don't see yourself that way. You just want the job done quickly, with as little horror as possible. But you do take care of the tools, because if you mess up, people die horribly. Well, more horribly than planned. Tonight, you catch your reflection in the blade as you inspect the edge. You see your eyes, hollow and sharp. You wonder how many times has this thing reflected your face, how many versions of you has it known. You set it back down and cover it with cloth. Outside, an owl hoots. The town sleeps. Your tools wait, always clean, always ready. The square smells like old wood, coal smoke, and something faintly coppery that never quite washes out. You know that smell. So does the crowd. You don't talk about it, but it lingers like a whisper in the cobblestones. You're on the scaffold. Again, today's job should be routine. A thief turned killer, caught red-handed. The sentence is clear. The rope's been measured, the noose tied, the trapdoor checked. All by you, of course, because no one else touches the tools. Even the carpenter who built the platform kept wiping his hands, like your presence was contagious. The condemned man is shaking, young, maybe 19. His mother sobs in the crowd. He tried not to look at her. You have to stay steady, professional, like a statue with a heartbeat. You step forward, check the knot one more time, and glance at the mechanism. You've oiled it. It should work. You pull the lever, and it doesn't. The trapdoor sticks for half a second, just long enough for the crowd to gasp, and when it finally drops, it's not clean. The rope jerks, and the man kicks. The worst part isn't the noise, it's the time it takes too long. You've read his weight wrong. Not enough drop. This is what you dread most. When it doesn't go cleanly, you step in quickly, whispering something, nothing, really just to distract the boy as he gasps. The guards move, but slow. The crowd murmurs. Some turn away. Others stare. This is when the job hurts. Missed swings. Sticky trapdoors. Failing knots. Execution isn't always neat. And when it isn't, it stains more than just the scaffold. It stains you. Historians still argue whether medieval executioners were punished for botched jobs. In some cases, yes, especially if the condemned was noble, or the error sparked unrest. But often, no one said anything. The horror was part of the show. In fact, there are accounts of crowds demanding a second blow, howling for blood like they'd paid for entertainment and wanted their full ticket's worth. You've heard those howls. It's worse when you miss a beheading. Your first time was years ago. You remember the man, clearly tall, proud, defiant, even in chains. You swung with everything you had. But nerves, maybe, or a dull spot on the edge, or just bad luck, and the blade hit bone but didn't finish. He screamed, so did the crowd. You swung again, and again, 3 times total. By then, no one was cheering, not even breathing. Afterward, you cleaned the blade in silence, hands shaking, while the priest murmured prayers and the bailiff avoided your eyes. For days, people stared at you even more than usual. Not in fear, in judgment. It doesn't matter that you tried your best. All they saw was failure. One fringe case from 17th century Sweden tells of an executioner who took 5 strokes to finish the job. They let him live but banned him from ever working again. His tools were buried. Some say he joined a monastery. Others claim he drank himself to death. You don't know which fate is worse. Even with rope, things go wrong. The worst is a partial hang when the neck doesn't snap. Then you have to step in, pull the legs, or use a secondary method. That's why you carry the small knife. Not for theatrics, for mercy. People don't realize how often you think about mercy, but you can't talk about that. Not to the crowd, not to the guards, definitely not to the priests. After today's hanging, you spend hours cleaning the platform. It's not in your job description, but if you leave it, no one else will touch it. The blood, the stains, the panic your mess to erase. You scrub the wood with brine water and coarse brushes until your hands go raw. Your fingers smell like salt and iron. You stop only when the sun dips low and shadows pool beneath the scaffold like ink dot at home. You collapse onto your bench and try not to replay the moment, but you do, over and over. You know that every mistake becomes a ghost. It stays with you on your blade, in your dreams, sometimes even in the faces of passers-by. You wonder if that boy's mother will ever meet your gaze again. Probably not. Even if she does, her eyes will be hollow. In some towns there were ways to make it up. Pay penance, light candles, donate anonymously to the family. You've tried that, it never makes you feel better. If anything, it just confirms that you're guilty of something. Even if it wasn't your fault, you think about quitting sometimes, walking away, vanishing into a forest, or signing on as a mercenary. But where would you go? Who would hire you? You're marked. Everyone knows your face, your hands, your walk. You're the blade that breathes, and there's always someone waiting for the next swing dot, so you stay. You clean the gear, you oil the hinges. You whisper to the tools like they're old friends or maybe old enemies. You tell yourself next time will be better, and if it's not, well, you've survived worse. You didn't apply for this job. Nobody does. In most towns, executioner isn't a position posted on a wooden board with a polite inquiry within. There's no career path for this. You don't wake up at age 10 and say, when I grow up, I want to decapitate people for a living. But somehow, here you are. So how did you get here? There are 3 common ways someone ends up in your boots: inheritance, punishment, or accident. Lucky you probably hit the trifecta. In some regions, especially Central Europe, the role of executioner passed down through generations like a cursed family heirloom. If your father held the axe, chances were you'd hold it too. Not because you wanted to, but because no one else would marry you, hire you, or let you do anything else. Bloodlines became lifelines. Being the hangman's son was both a stigma and a job guarantee. Nepotism never looked so grim. Inheriting the role came with expectations. You were taught early how to tie knots, clean blades, judge weight. For a hanging, you were your father's assistant before you were out of short pants. No toys, just ropes and steel. Your bedtime stories were trial records. Instead of lullabies, your father muttered prayers for mercy. But what if you weren't born into it? Well, then there's path number 2, punishment. In many towns, condemned criminals were offered a terrible bargain: be executed, or become the executioner. Imagine that. You're standing on the scaffold, neck bared, and the judge leans in with a choice: die or kill for us. Take the role, wear the mask, and carry out the law you nearly died by. Some said yes, most said no. Those who accepted were often branded anyway because mercy only stretches so far when you're holding the axe. Fringe tidbit for you. There's an account from 15th century Bavaria of a man convicted of murder who was given a full pardon if he agreed to be the town executioner for life. He lasted 6 months, then vanished. People claimed he ran into the woods and became a hermit. Others whispered darker endings. And then there's the third pather. Oops, route. That's when someone just needs an executioner and looks around the room like, okay, which one of you owns a knife and doesn't flinch at blood? Maybe it's the town butcher. Maybe it's a soldier with a shaky past. Maybe it's you because you said yes once, and now they won't let you leave. You never officially said, I want to do this. It just happened. And once it does, good luck doing anything else. Historians still argue whether this coercion was formal or informal. Some suggest laws required towns to maintain a designated executioner. Others argue it was more of a social trap. Once you performed a single execution, that was it. You were stained. Nobody would break bread with you. Nobody would hire you for normal work. Your only path forward was backward, back to the scaffold. It's not like you could switch jobs either. You can't go from executioner to baker. No one wants your flour. And even if you tried to leave, your name would follow. In some records, executioners were required to carry written proof of their identities, so other towns wouldn't think they were just some wanderer with a shady past. You were registered. like livestock or criminals, and don't think you got paid up front. In fact, for a lot of executioners, payment came in strange forms. A few coins here and there, a portion of the condemned clothes, sometimes leftovers, as in body parts, because back then, people believed certain things had magical or medicinal power. Fat from hanged men was said to cure ailments. Hangman's rope, a powerful amulet, especially if you kept a piece under your pillow. You never know when you'll need a good nightmare. The townspeople might shun you, but they weren't above knocking at your door in the dead of night, asking, "Hey, do you have any thumb bits left?" And you'd sell it, because what else were you going to do? Open a smoothie shop? You look at your hands now, scarred, rough, slightly bent from years of gripping tools. Not the hands of a volunteer. More like the hands of someone who didn't know how to say no, or someone who did, but no one listened. A neighbor's boy once asked you, "Do you like your job?" You didn't answer. You just stared at your boots until he got uncomfortable and ran off. Because here's the truth. You don't know if you like it. You don't even know who you'd be without it. Some nights, when the wind is just right and the town is quiet, you remember things you might have been: a healer, a mason, a man with clean fingernails. Instead, you're here. The job no one wants. The man no one touches. The profession that never knocks it, just selects. There's a market in the village square every third morning, colorful cloth hung from crooked stalls. The clamor of bartering, the sweet scent of honey cakes baking in the nearby ovens. You go anyway you shouldn't. You know what's coming. The moment you step onto the cobblestones, people see you, and conversation dies mid-sentence, like a candle snuffed by a sudden gust. It's not hostility, not exactly. It's the Cold War version. Silence, space, and that look. The one that says, "You're necessary, but please, not here." You walk slowly, scanning the stalls. The cheese vendor glances your way, then busies himself with invisible tasks. The butcher won't look up. The woman selling apples moves her crate behind her back, as if your shadow might bruise the fruit. You're the town's ghost. But you're not dead. Just dead to them. It's lonely work. Not just during the job, but especially outside of it. When you're not swinging an axe or tying a noose, you're still him. The one who kills. The one who does what must be done. The one people cross themselves over when your back is turned, and don't expect friendship. You once tried, months ago. Sat near the hearth at the tavern. Bought a round, told a story with a laugh at the end. They laughed too, but only out of discomfort. The moment you left for the privy, your drink was moved, your seat abandoned. When you came back, only the fire remained. You finished your drink standing. Marriage. Let's not be silly. Most women won't speak to you. Mothers pull their daughters away from your path, like you're the devil on casual stroll. The only way you're likely to marry is through another executioner family, those rare bloodlines where the children inherit not just the job, but the exile. Two outcasts building a quiet corner of survival together. Historians still argue how total this social isolation really was. Some say executioners had entire communities of their own, walled off in function, but not always in spirit. Others insist the role was universally isolating, a true social death sentence, regardless of location. You live the latter. There's a boy in the village 10, maybe 11, who throws stones at your house. Small ones. He never breaks anything, just aims to be heard. His friends dare him, and he always accepts. Last week, you caught him lingering afterward, staring at your sharpening bench through the window. You opened the door. He ran. You weren't going to yell. You were going to ask if he needed something. That's the thing. People think you enjoy this, that you relish the role, that you sleep on a bed of skulls and wash your hair with guiltless water. They think the axe is an extension of your joy. It isn't. You've tried writing, not much, just a few words here and there on the backs of old warrants or pieces of parchment used for inventory, mostly thoughts, fragments, a line that reads, "I do not ask to be forgiven, but I wish someone would." Another, "Every man dies, not every man hears himself die first." That one you copied from somewhere. You're not sure where. You burn most of them, because what if someone found them? You're expected to be a creature, not a thinker, a fringe curiosity. In some cities, executioners had their own entrances to public buildings, if they were allowed in at all. A side door at best. More often, they weren't allowed in sacred spaces at all. No weddings, no confessions, no blessings. The priest might give you a nod, but not a sacrament. Not with your hands. You can still hear one say, "Your touch cannot carry grace," so you stop trying to touch anything. At night, the silence of your house echoes louder than screams. You cook in a single pot, eat from the same bowl, drink from a plain wooden cup that no one else ever uses. You tried to leave it at the tavern once. The next morning, it was returned, left neatly on your doorstep, with a note that said, "You forgot this." No name, just the handwriting of someone who wished you'd stay forgotten. There was a time when a dog used to follow you around, up to mutt with one ear and a limp. It didn't care who you were, just wanted scraps. You named it Ash. It sat beside you during one hanging, never flinched. That night, you gave it a full sausage. A week later, it was gone. Some say someone poisoned it, others say it wandered off. You don't ask. You don't want to know. People say that evil is contagious, that if you break the law, hang around wicked men, or speak with devils, their darkness seeps into you. That's what they see when they look at you. Seepage, not a man, but a sponge, of guilt, a vessel for the things they never want to hold themselves. But they need you. Oh, they need you. When a killer stalks the roads, when a noble demands justice, when the bishop wants order, they come to you. They whisper your name. They look away while doing it, but they still knock on your door, and you always answer, because it's the only door they've left open for you. You rise before the bells again, not for execution, not for trial, but for something quieter, and somehow darker. Torture day. The term makes your stomach turn, but that's what they call it. Interrogation, if they're trying to sound formal. Persuasion, if they're pretending to be moral. But you know what it is, and they expect you to do it. You didn't sign up for this part either. It's not technically your job, except it is. In many towns, the executioner is also the torturer, the jailer, the occasional bodyguard. You're not just the last face. The condemned see you're often the one who helps get the confession that makes them condemned. You hate this more than the hangings. There's no crowd today, no scaffold, just the stone chamber beneath the courthouse, where the light barely reaches and the air tastes of mold and despair. You descend the stairs like someone walking into their own nightmare, step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat. Your tools wait on a table, thumbscrews, ropes, iron bars, and a bucket of water so cold it might as well be ice. The prisoner's already chained a thief accused of consorting with bandits. He claims innocence. They always do. Sometimes they are. That's the worst part. You don't speak. The bailiff reads the charges. The scribe stands in the corner, pen scratching softly, already writing down a confession that hasn't been given yet. The priest is there too, supposedly to witness and pray, but he stays very quiet. And then they look at you. No orders. Just a glance, because everyone knows what comes next. You tighten the straps on the chair. You wrap the cords around the man's wrists. He begs, already, whispers his daughter's name, says he was just in the wrong place. You don't answer. Your face must stay empty, like your hands aren't about to become instruments of state pain. You begin. Not too much pressure, not at first. There's a rhythm to it, a science almost. Just enough to frighten, just enough to crack resolve, but not bone. Not yet. That comes later. Maybe. You've learned this over time, not from anyone teaching you, but from watching, from doing. You know when a scream is real and when it's for show. You know when a body shifts out of panic and when it starts to go limp. You know how long a man can hold his breath underwater before fear breaks through pride. There's a moment, always, when they give in. The voice changes, softer, strained. A name is offered, a date, a vague direction. Sometimes it's real, sometimes it's just what they think you want to hear. And then you stop. The scribe nods. The bailiff looks pleased. The priest mumbles a benediction that sounds more like a cough. You undo the straps. The man sags like a torn flag. You carry him back to his cell. You try not to look at his eyes. You rarely succeed. Historians still argue whether torture was meant to extract truth or simply justify sentences that were already decided. Some claim confessions under duress were required to seal a legal verdict. Others say it was all theater. The pain was the punishment, the words just a bonus. You believe both are true. Back upstairs. No one thanks you. No one offers water or food. They don't even acknowledge what you just did. You walk home through alleys, keeping to the shadows, still hearing the man's voice. In your head, his daughter's name repeats like a prayer you don't deserve to speak. At home, you scrub your hands for a long time. The water runs red, then pink, then clear. You keep scrubbing. Your hands are shaking. You stare at your nails, like they're strangers. One is split. You didn't even notice. You sit outside. The air is sharp, cold, honest. Here's a fringe detail for you. In 16th century France, some towns paid executioners a bonus for confessions extracted before sentencing. A tidy little motivation to make sure the truth got told. Others offered free meals, small parcels of land, even better housing. A sick kind of promotion ladder. You've never seen those perks. All you have is your house at the edge of town, the smell of damp iron, and the long silence between each job. But the worst part, sometimes you wonder if they want you to enjoy it, to lean into the role, to become the monster they all believe you already are. You don't. You cling to what little humanity you have left. You feed the stray cat again. You water the shriveled herb pot on your windowsill. You say your name out loud, just to remember that it isn't hangman, or butcher, or sinner. It's just a name, but even that feels borrowed now. You sleep lightly that night. When you do dream, it's of ropes tightening, bones creaking, eyes wide with disbelief. Sometimes they thank you in the dream. Sometimes they scream. But the worst are the ones who whisper, "I didn't do it," as you turn the wheel. And you wake up before they finish. You're back in the square mid-morning, sharp sun, no clouds to soften the mood. It's hot enough to bake bread on the scaffold beams. And the crowd, oh, they're here, early, eager, restless. You stand behind the condemned, adjusting the rope, your fingers moving on autopilot. The man's been sentenced for heresy, whatever that means this week. You haven't read the full charges. You stopped reading them years ago. The words never match the faces. But this time, something's different. You hear murmurs, not the usual bored chatter. These are sharp, low, tense. The crowd's humming like a hive of angry wasps. You glance at the guard's eyes darting hands, gripping spears just a little too tightly. Then you spot it. A cluster of townsfolk at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, faces hard. One woman's holding a sign daubed in charcoal. Not justice, just blood. Another shouts something about murder under a hood. And suddenly, it's not just a gathering, it's a protest. You've seen riots before. The kind that start with booze and end with bricks through windows. You know the signs, the way tension clings to the air, the shifting weight of the crowd, the hush before the roar. And you're standing in the middle of it, holding a rope. You're not the judge. You didn't declare this man guilty. But try telling them that. Right now, to the crowd, you're the hand that swings the state's will, the blade of a machine they hate. You tighten the noose. The condemned whispers a prayer, or maybe it's a curse. The guards signal you to continue, but your body hesitates, not from fear of the job, but fear of what happens after. If this goes wrong, they won't remember the man who ordered it. They'll remember the one who carried it out. You pull the lever anyway. The trapdoor gives. The rope snaps tight. The man jerks, then stills. For a moment, it's quiet. Then someone throws a rock. It misses barely, but the message lands. More follow. Rotten vegetables. A heel of bread. A clay mug that shatters near your boot. The guards surge forward, trying to contain it. You duck, grab your tools, and back away from the scaffold like it's on fire. You make it down the stairs, through the alley, and home in one piece. But your breath doesn't slow until the door's bolted shut behind you. Crowds are unpredictable. You've known that from your first execution. One day, they cheer like you're a hero. The next, they turn like wolves. Historians still argue whether executioners were respected or reviled by the public. Some point to records of towns offering them extra coin during festival executions, trying to ensure a clean show. Others cite angry mobs and sudden disappearances of entire executioner families after botched politically charged jobs. The truth probably lies in both. 1 week a necessity, the next a scapegoat. You remember a story from 2 towns over Ain. Executioner, stoned to death by a crowd after a noblewoman's son was hanged. They said he swung too soon, too coldly. As if there's a warm way to end a life, the state replaced him by week's end. That story haunts you more than the dreams. Back in your cottage, you sit at the table, hands still trembling. You don't light a fire, don't eat. You just stare at the wall, waiting for the noise to fade from your bones. Later, someone knocks on your door. You flinch, but it's not a mob, just the town's bailiff. He brings a sack of coins. Hazard. Pay, he calls it. You almost laugh, as if coins can cushion a thrown stone. You nod, accept it, and closed the door without speaking. Inside, you examined the bruises on your forearm. Not deep, but tomorrow they'll bloom purple and green badges of a job well done. And here's the irony. They'll still need you. The next trial will end the same way. The crowd will come back. Maybe quieter, maybe not. And you'll climb the scaffold again. You always do. You once read well heard. Because books are a luxury, you aren't welcome to borrow that. The Roman executioners wore masks not just to hide their faces, but to protect their families from vengeance, from shame, from the stink of violence that clings to skin like soot. You don't wear a mask. Maybe you should. Maybe that's why they can throw rocks, because they see your eyes, your jaw, your uncertainty. And it's easier to blame a man than a system. Fringe fact: in some cities, executioners were given guards not to protect others from them, but to protect them from others. Not everyone hated the criminal. Sometimes the crowd sympathized. Sometimes the victim had friends, or gold, or titles. And then the person they wanted to see punished was you. You pour a drink. Not much, just enough to warm your throat. Then, you sit on the step outside your house, bruises humming, staring up at the sky. Tomorrow it might happen again. You might swing clean, or you might misstep. The wind might shift. The crowd might howl, but the job stays yours, because no one else wants it. And you're not sure you want it either, but you're here, and they keep knocking. You've hanged men, beheaded nobles, broken thieves on the Wieland now. Apparently, it's time to boil someone alive. Yes, that's today's order. You wake early, summoned by a red-faced constable holding a rolled decree stamped in wax. A visiting magistrate has ruled it. Execution by boiling. The condemned poisoned a wealthy merchant's son, or maybe just angered the wrong noble at the wrong tavern. Doesn't matter. The sentence is passed, and you're the one with the privilege of carrying it out. You head to the central square. Not the scaffold this time. This needs fire and containment. And oh yes, a massive iron cauldron that's already been hauled out from a storage cellar like it's soup season. The blacksmith helped set it up. He refused to touch the fuel, but hammered the frame anyway, muttering prayers under his breath. You stir the water. It's cold for now, not for long. You start building the fire underneath. Dry wood, oil-soaked rags, and a flint. You work in silence. The townspeople already gathering, curious, uncomfortable. Some with excited eyes that you'd rather not meet. Because here's the dark truth. There are spectators who love this. Not all, not most, but some. People who whisper. I heard the bones pop with a kind of gleeful awe. People who lean forward when the screaming starts. You hate them the most. Not because they exist, but because they make you feel something worse than shame. Complicity. The pot bubbles. Slow at first, then quicker. It hisses like an angry animal. Steam coiling into the sky. The condemned arrives dragged between two guards, shackled, sobbing. He's not fighting, not shouting innocence. He's just shivering. You check the chains. You don't speak to him. Not because you don't want to, but because if you do, might start asking questions you can't afford to carry home. Historians still debate how widespread boiling executions really were. Some claim they were rare, symbolic, meant to send a message. Others argue they happened more often than we like to admit, particularly for poisoners and counterfeiters. What's certain is this: they were public, very public, and you had to make sure it all worked. You lower him slowly. That's the rule. After all, a full dunk is too quick. They want it slow, want the pain to rise with the temperature, want to make it clear to the crowd that this is what awaits the disobedient. He screams. Of course he does. You stare at a fixed point in the sky and try not to hear it. Try not to hear the flesh blistering, or the crowd murmuring, or the priest murmuring Latin so fast you'd think it was a race. After it's done, after the man stops thrashing and the steam carries the smell across the square, you do what you always do. Clean, empty the pot, scrub what you can, let the rest blacken in the sun. The townspeople filter out, some shaken, some smug, most silent. It's always quiet after something like this, like the town itself holds its breath. You walk home through alleys. The main roads are a little too exposed today. You wash your hands, twice then again, but you can't wash out the smell. Boiling's worse than burning. At least with fire, things turn to ash. Boiling keeps everything there, just rearranged. There's a story from the Low Country, Muy Quientos Essie, where a woman convicted of poisoning 3 husbands was boiled in oil. Not water, oil. They said the crowd was silent the whole time. No cheers, just quiet horror. You wonder what's worse, their silence or their clapping. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some people believed the steam from a boiling execution had magical properties, that if you inhaled it, you could cure lung disease. Others thought it would curse your family for 7 generations. You wonder which it's doing to you. That night, you eat little, drink a bit more than usual. Try to focus on something else, the sound of wind in the trees, the feel of your cat brushing past your ankle, the crackle of your fire, anything but the pot. You poke the embers and think about the tools you used today. Not the axe, not the rope, just wood, fire, and water. The basics. Nature, turned into punishment. It makes you feel worse somehow, like the earth itself is part of this cycle, helping you carry out your work. You sit by the window, watching fog roll across the field. You tell yourself this one was rare, that it won't happen again for a long time, that next week it'll be a clean beheading, quick and simple, that the crowd won't throw things, that the condemned will be guilty beyond doubt. You tell yourself these lies so you can sleep, but even in sleep, you hear the bubbling. The town square is quiet this morning, unusually so, but you know better than to enjoy it. Quiet always means something's building. You haul your gear across the muddy road. Today's task isn't an execution or a flogging, it's cleanup. After all, no one talks about what happens after a body falls limp. Who handles the mess? Who moves the corpse? Who scrapes brains off the scaffold? Spoiler, it's you. The sun's still climbing, but the scent is already thick in the air-dried blood, scorched wood, and something else you can't name but recognize instantly, the stale reek of death. You pull your leather apron higher over your chest and breathe through your mouth. Doesn't help much. This part of the job is thankless. The scaffold's slick from last week's beheading. Someone slipped during the market yesterday and blamed you for it, even though you hadn't been within shouting distance. A fishmonger nearly tossed his entire stall over it. So today, you're here with scrub brushes, buckets of brine, and 2 apprentices from the jail who drew the short straw. They won't meet your eyes. One pretends you're not there. The other mumbles a greeting and gets straight to work, eyes fixed on the planks. You don't speak. You're not there to teach them. You're just trying to keep the flies away. A few townsfolk pass by. Some mutter curses. Others avert their eyes. One tosses an old onion in your direction and walks on without waiting to see if it hits. It doesn't, but the message is clear. You scrape dried blood from between the boards and think about the irony. You're the one who delivers justice, but you're treated like the crime itself. And here's the kicker on top of doing executions and torture. You're also the town's unofficial everything else. You collect fines. You sweep prison cells. You deliver messages to magistrates when no one else will. Sometimes you even dig graves, because the gravedigger's drunk or dead or just doesn't want to bury someone you executed. In smaller towns, especially, the executioner was a one-man justice department, minus the praise, pension, or days off. Historians still argue whether this multitasking role was formalized or just the result of towns trying to get more horror per coin. Some say there were laws outlining these duties. Others think it was all tradition passed down like a broomstick nobody wanted to touch. You remember the time you were asked to evict an old widow from her cottage. She hadn't paid taxes. You stood at her door, holding the notice. She opened it and froze. You didn't even have to say anything. Just the sight of you was enough to make her weep. She moved out the next day. You've also been asked to babysit prisoners while the jailer eats lunch, to inventory stolen goods, to carry messages during outbreaks of plague. Because hey, you're already cursed, right? They didn't even bother masking the insult. And perhaps the strangest job, you once had to chase a goose. A magistrate's goose escaped during a sentencing, flapping through the court like justice incarnate. It knocked over inkwells, made a mess of someone's wig, and vanished out the open door. The court froze. Then, all eyes turned to you. It took you 40 minutes, to bruised knees, and a lot of inner screaming, but you caught the goose. No thank yous. Just a nod and a muttered, back to your post. Fringe tidbit for you. In some parts of Europe, executioners had to deliver messages of execution to other cities on foot. Imagine being hated locally and then taking your act on tour. A traveling spectacle no one wants to feed or house. Yet, everyone watches like you're the Grim Reaper on errands. Your day-to-day continues like that, mundane, repetitive, just unpleasant enough to remind you why no one else wants this job. You finish scrubbing the scaffold by mid, the wood stained beyond saving in places. The grain is permanently darkened from years of soaking up what no soap can remove. You consider sanding it down, but the tools for that are broken again, and the carpenter refuses to lend you his. You sit on the edge of the scaffold, looking at your hands, cracked knuckles, red raw. Your palms are half callous, half blister. You used to have soft hands once. The cat from your doorstep shows up again, jumps up beside you, rests its head on your knee. It doesn't care about the stains, you think. This is the closest thing to affection I've gotten in weeks. You head home with sore arms, the stink of brine on your boots, and a headache building between your eyes. The guard at the jail tosses you a loaf of hard bread as you pass. Doesn't speak, just throws it. It bounces on the dirt. You pick it up, brush off the worst of it, and nod. Tonight, you'll eat alone. You'll sleep alone. You'll wake alone. And when the next grotesque task is handed down from above, a torture, execution, or maybe just cleaning another man's filth, you'll do it. Because no one else will, and because no one else can. It's a cold, wet evening when you're called again. Not for another execution, no. Tonight you're summoned for something far stranger. There's been a death in the prison. Not by rope. Not by axe. Natural causes, they say. Or as natural as can happen in a rat-infested cell with no blanket and 1 bowl of water a day. The prisoner died before trial. A petty thief with no family and no name worth remembering, at least according to the jailer. But now the townspeople are whispering, say he cursed you. No one saw it, but someone claims, just before his last breath, he muttered your namur, full name, and swore you'd die before the moon changed. Now they're staring, not just at you like usual. This is different. There's suspicion in the air, and something else, fear. You've heard this kind of tale before. Superstition runs deep here. It's older than the town, older than the crown, older than reason. People believe in the power of dying words. They think a curse uttered by a man on the edge of death travels with his soul like an arrow loosed from a bow, straight and true. And since you were the one who broke him during a recent interrogation, no less the curse is yours to carry. You try to shrug it off, but even you feel the weight of it. You remember every word he spoke, every scream, the way his eyes locked on yours at the end, as if trying to brand his hatred into your skull. Maybe he did curse you, maybe not, but now it's in the air, like smoke, impossible to touch, impossible to ignore. Historians still argue how seriously people took deathbed curses in the Middle Ages. Some suggest it was pure drama, rumor spiraling into legend. Others believe towns kept lists of those marked by a dying man's final breath, watched for signs of bad harvests, plagues, even livestock acting strangely. And now, they're watching you. The baker won't sell you bread. The water from your well tastes off sour metallic. Your cat vanishes for 2 days, then returns, limping. A farmer's wife says your shadow passed over her chickens, and 3 of them died. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe people just want someone to blame. You're a convenient target, after all. If anything bad happens, it's easy to point at the man who deals in death. A fringe belief from Bohemia. If a condemned man cursed you before dying, the only way to break the curse was to sleep with iron under your bed, wear white linen to sleep, and bathe before dawn in a river that runs east. Think about trying it. You don't. You're not sure you'd survive the river in winter anyway. That night, you sit at your workbench, sharpening your tools more slowly than usual. You light no candles, the fire's low. You listen for sounds in the dark, and then you hear it, a whisper, faint, from the corner of the room. You freeze. You strain your ears. Nothing, but the moment passes, and something inside you shifts. Fear or fatigue. You're not sure. Sleep, when it comes, is broken and restless. You dream of eyes watching you through cracks in the wall, of chains rattling, of a voice that sounds like the prisoner's, whispering your name again and again. You wake, drenched in sweat, the dawn barely bleeding through your shuttered window. In the following days, things worsened. You cut your hand while honing your axe, rare mistake. The wound festers. Your boots crack and leak in the rain. One of your execution ropes snaps during testing. The replacement you ordered comes late and frayed. Townsfolk pass you and spit. The curse lives. Whether real or not, you try to carry on. Keep your routine. Scrub the tools. Feed the cat. Burn rosemary. one of the old methods said to ward off dark spirits. But the air in your home feels heavy. Sit outside one evening, staring up at the sky. The moon's full. The same moon, they say, marks the limit of a death curse. You sip your drink, fingers trembling, and think, if I make it to morning, does it lift? You don't know. You stay up all night, and the next morning, nothing happens. The cat's asleep at your feet. The wind is still. The sun rises, slow and gold. You're alive, but it doesn't feel like victory, because now, everyone's certain the curse didn't work, and that's even worse. Now they think you're immune, that you're protected by something darker than death itself. A man who can't be cursed is a man not entirely human. Congratulations, you just leveled up from hated to feared. The letter comes by hand, delivered by a young page wearing royal colors and a look of mild horror. He doesn't say anything as he passes it to you, just shuffles backward like you might bite. You're used to that by now. The seal is crimson, wax, pressed with a noble crest. You don't recognize. You break it open. The letter is curt, formal. You're summoned to the manor of Lord Alric de Morven, one of the regional nobles. No explanation, just a location, a date, and a very clear instruction. Bring your tools. You sigh. This isn't a request, it's an order. You travel 3 days on foot, sleeping beneath hedgerows and ignoring the suspicious glances of every farmer you pass. You carry your axe in a long canvas wrap, like a musician with a very grim instrument. No one asks what's inside. When you arrive, the manor is huge stone walls, high towers, a drawbridge that creaks like it's as uncomfortable as you are. A servant leads you in without speaking. You pass through gilded halls and tapestries, too clean for your hands to touch. And then you're in the presence of Lord Ulrich. He's old but sharp-eyed, sitting by a fire as if the world outside doesn't exist. He doesn't ask your name. He already knows it. I want a private execution, he says. My brother. You glance to the side. There, tied to a chair, is a man who looks like a broken version of the Lord's same jaw, same brow, but sunken, twitching. A traitor, perhaps. A family dispute turned bloody. Family honor, Ulrich mutters. It must be done quietly. No crowd, no fuss, no questions. You nod. You don't get to refuse these things. Not when the order comes with a crest. Private executions are different beasts. No cheering crowd, no spectacle. Just silence, thick and suffocating. And the pressure to get it perfect is higher than ever, because this isn't just a death. It's politics. Historians still argue how much control nobles had over executioners. In theory, you serve the law. In practice, you serve whoever feeds you and doesn't put you on the scaffold instead. In towns like this, lords often had their own gallows, their own preferences, their own reasons to keep things discreet. You unwrap your axe slowly. Ulrich watches every motion. You can feel his gaze like a blade on your back. The condemned doesn't plead. He just stares at the fire, lips moving in silent prayer. Or, maybe curses. You'll never know. You do your job. Clean, quick, no applause. Just the dull thud of the body slumping forward, and a wet silence that drips into your spine. Ulrich nods, once, then turns away. You clean your blade in a bowl of wine, yes wine, and wrap it again. A pouch of silver is placed on the table. More than your monthly pay. You take it without speaking. As you're led out, you pass servants scrubbing blood from the stone. You're not allowed to help. You're not allowed to look back. You leave the manor at dawn, walking fast, the silver clinking in your pack and feeling heavier than it should. Not just in weight, in consequence. Because this job wasn't justice. It wasn't law. It was convenience. Family housekeeping. A fringe fact. There are records of royal executioners being summoned to castles under false names, forced to sign vows of silence, and then made to carry out killings in chambers far from the public eye. Sometimes the condemned were political enemies, sometimes relatives, and sometimes inconvenient lovers. On your walk home, you think about that man's face, the way he didn't scream, the way his brother didn't flinch, the firelight reflecting in both their eyes. You wonder how many other private jobs go undocumented. How many deaths like this vanish between parchment and rumor. Back in your town, no one knows where you've been. No one asks. They only notice your boots are muddy and your hands are even quieter than usual. You sit by your fire that night, the pouch of silver untouched beside you. You don't feel rich, you feel used, and worse, you feel complicit. But in your line of work, that's just another day. You wake before the crows, body still stiff from travel. The silver pouch from Lord Ulrich sits on the shelf, untouched. You haven't spent a coin, not out of morality, but because every merchant in town sees it as tainted. This morning, a knock at your door. A guard, a message, not from the local court, but from another town across the river. A full day's ride if the roads are dry and the weather holds. They want you, apparently. Their own executioner is Ilord Dador, just done with the job. You're not sure. The details are vague. All you know is that they've requested your services for a special case. Payment promised. Travel paid. You stare at the note. Travel jobs are a risk. When you execute in another town, you're a stranger with a blade. No reputation, no history, just the face that ends things. If something goes wrong, they won't protect you. You don't belong to them. But saying no isn't an option. Not when it's been requested. So you go. You ride alone, a borrowed horse snorting under your weight. The countryside slips past grey skies, muddy fields, shepherds with wide eyes who pause when they see you. Somehow they know. Even dressed plainly, carrying your tools wrapped in wool and rope, people can sense it. Like animals before a storm, when you arrive, the town feels different, cleaner, perhaps, bigger, with straighter streets and buildings that don't sag like the ones back home. But that makes it worse, in a way, because this place has rules, manners, protocol, and you don't belong here. The bailiff greets you with a nod and a tight smile. You're led to the holding cells, briefed on the crime. A merchant accused of treason, to be executed before sunset as an example. You're told not to speak, not to make eye contact, not to linger. Fine. But when you reach the scaffold, you realize the worst part of travel executions. The audience doesn't know you. They aren't used to your face, your movements, your way of working. And when they don't know you, they don't trust you. Historians still argue whether traveling executioners were more feared than local ones. Some towns considered them mercenary soulless tools hired to carry out particularly grim or political sentences. Others treated them as curiosities, whispering that the hangman from the west had magical talents or a body count higher than the plague. You step onto the scaffold. The prisoner looks at you with wide, desperate eyes. You don't know his name. He doesn't know yours. But here you are sharing the most intimate moment a human can experience. The last dot, you ready, the axe. You do the job, clean, quick, impersonal. And when the body hits the platform, the crowd, doesn't clap, doesn't boo. They pause, then whisper, because that's what you are here, whispers. They whisper about your tools, your stance, your silence. They say you move like a shadow, that your axe doesn't make noise, that you didn't blink when the blood hit your boot. You leave before sundown. The bailiff hands you a sack of coins and doesn't shake your hand. You don't expect him to. You ride home slower than you came, not from fatigue, but from a weight you can't shake. Outsider status has a way of lingering. For days after your return, people look at you differently, as if you've changed, as if your travels added something to your soul, something dark. And maybe they did, because when you killed that man, you felt nothing, not guilt, not fear, not even the usual dull ache of sorrow. Just a task, like hauling water or mending a fence, that frightens you. You wonder if this is what it means to become the blade, to stop being the hand, to be used and used up. Fringe fact: in 14th century Hungary, one traveling executioner became so infamous he was nicknamed the Grey Rider. He wore no colors, spoke to no one, performed over 200 executions across 6 towns, then disappeared. Some said he became a ghost. Others said he returned home, took up farming, and never spoke of it again. You think about that man as you sit by your hearth, hands wrapped around a mug of something hot and bitter. You could disappear, too, vanish into the forest, drop the axe down a well, walk until your name forgets itself. But they'd find another, and when that one dies, maybe they'll call you back, because a clean swing is hard to find, and you've never missed. They bring you a note, scrawled in haste, urgent, confession not yet extracted. Magistrate demands compliance by dawn. You already know what this means. You set down your bread, which you were barely chewing anyway, and reach for your coat. It's the 3rd time this month. The prison stinks of stale sweat and older sins. You don't even blink anymore when the jailer waves you in without eye contact. Tonight's prisoner is unusual. He's calm, accused of arson and suspected of sedition. no confession yet. And of course, no trial can proceed until the words are written in ink, preferably with a few drops of blood for dramatic effect. He sits straight in the chair, back against the wall. His wrists are bound, but not trembling. That's your first warning sign. You set your tools down one by one, deliberate, slow. It's part of the ritual. Not to frighten exactly, but to inform, to let them know what's coming. He watches. No begging, no whimpering, just a slight nod, like he's already accepted this part of the story. You begin. It starts the usual way. Tighten the thumbscrews, not enough to break, just enough to bite. But he doesn't cry out, doesn't even flinch. You apply pressure to the base of the fingers, an old trick that usually gets a reaction within minutes. Still, nothing. You switch to a different method. Water. Not the theatrical version, not buckets and rags, just controlled, slow suffocation, measured drowning. He fights that, finally. Not with screams, but instinct, gasping, coughing, rage behind the eyes. He looks at you like he wants to carve your name into the wall with his breath. You pause. He speaks, but not to confess. You do this too easily, he rasps. You think being methodical makes it merciful. You step back, not because of fear, but because somewhere in you, a place, long buried, something stirs. Because he's not wrong. You've gotten good at this. You know how much pressure a joint can take, how long someone can hold their breath, how to make pain precise. And in some corner of your mind, that precision has started to feel like craft, like skill. Like pride. You hate that. Historians still argue whether executioners considered themselves craftsmen. Some records show them engraving initials into their blades, or keeping journals of their work. Others insist they viewed their job as shameful necessity, doing what no one else would to maintain order. You wonder where you fall now. The prisoner is coughing. He's given no names, no secrets. The magistrate is growing impatient, but you've hit your limit. Not hissurous. You stop. You turn to the bailiff. He's not ready. The bailiff frowns. We need the confession. Then you get it. You say, I'm not killing a man before the sentence is written. He stares, but he doesn't argue. You leave. This is dangerous. Refusal isn't defiance, but it's close. Too close. You walk home under a sky thick with clouds, each one pressing lower than the last. You feel the weight of them in your spine. Back in your house, you sit in silence. The fire pops and hisses. You reach for the silver coin from the travel job still untouched and roll it between your fingers. You think about what the prisoner said, and you wonder, have you grown numb, or have you simply become what they needed? A fringe tale from Poland speaks of an executioner who wore a ring, carved from bone. They said he ground a fragment of each condemned man into powder and sealed it in wax inside the ring. A piece of everyone he'd killed. A reminder, or maybe a trophy. You don't have a ring, but the echoes stay just the same. You think of the times your hands moved on their own. Muscle memory. No hesitation. No question. You were efficient. You were detached. You wonder if the man tonight will survive until morning. If the magistrate will assign someone else to finish the job. If the confession will be real, or forced, or forged. It doesn't matter. The outcome never depends on the truth, only the process. But that voice, it lingers. You do this too, easily. You glance at your tools, laid out in their usual order, clean, labeled, maintained like sacred relics. You don't sleep that night. Instead, you sharpen your axe, not because it needs it, but because you need to do something. Each stroke on the whetstone is smooth, deliberate, like a prayer, like penance, because you don't know if you're still the hand that swings, or if you've become the blade itself. The baker's boy was beheaded yesterday, not by you. That's the strangest part. You'd gone to the well early, hoping to avoid stares, and returned to whispers, rumors, the kind that bloomed fast in the corners of every alleyway. He was caught stealing a loaf, not his own family's, someone else's. There'd been 3 failed harvests. Prices had tripled, and the magistrate decided to set an example. So they called for justice, but not for you. They brought in a visiting knight with a sword and a tempersome one of noble blood and questionable accuracy. The sentence was carried out in the square, crowd packed in tight, everyone watching. The boy was 14. You didn't attend, but you heard about it. From the stammering fishmonger who stopped you at dusk, eyes wide, voice cracking. Took him 2 swings, the boy screamed. And now, everyone's quiet. Even the loudest gossips have nothing clever to say. because now they remember what happens when you're not the one doing it. For all their fear, their avoidance, their muttered curses about your presence, they remember, suddenly, that you never took more than one swing, and they hate you a little. Less. Just a little. Historians still debate whether medieval towns valued their executioners in practice, even while shunning them in public. Some towns gave theirs land, higher pay, even legal immunity from certain crimes. Others kept them on the margins, tolerated but never welcomed. But across regions, one truth rings out: a bad execution was worse than the crime that led to it, because pain wasn't supposed to linger. Not after the blade fell. You walk to the square that night. No one's there now, just the empty scaffold, the bloodstains darker than the wood beneath them. You kneel, fingers brushing the surface. You weren't asked to clean it, but you do anyway. The baker doesn't meet your eye the next morning, but his wife leaves a small basket at your door. Inside, a still warm loaf, wrapped in linen. The crust is cracked. The smell is honest. You eat it slowly, grateful in a way that has nothing to do with hunger. And then you get summoned again. This time, it's a noblewoman, highborn, accused of poisoning her husband with nightshade steeped in spiced wine. She claims innocence. The court is divided, but the sentence is passed. You arrive at the manor under grey skies, axe cleaned, face unreadable. The servants avoid you. The guards escort you through silk-lined corridors where no one dares speak above a whisper. They want it private. Again, you're led to a cold chamber with a fireplace that hasn't been lit. She stands at the center, unchained, regal even in disgrace. She looks at you, not with fear, but with disappointment. They say, "You're fast," she murmurs. "Let's hope they're right." You don't ask questions. It's not your place. But for some reason, you feel a need to say something. So you speak. Just once. "I'll be clean," she nods. "That's the most anyone's offered me this week." You do it quickly. The silence afterward is thick, but not cruel. The servants remove her body, and you're paid in coin left beside the hearth. You don't linger, but something about the way she looked at you won't leave. She didn't beg, she didn't cry. She expected dignity and trusted you to provide it, and you did. That evening, you return home and sit by the fire, turning that coin over in your hand. It's heavy, gilded. You could buy 2 weeks of food with it, or give it to the church, or melt it down and pretend it was never part of a noble woman's last moment. You toss it into a jar with the others. You wonder, sometimes, if the condemned are the only ones being judged. Fringe tale for tonight. In 13th century Italy, an executioner was said to always whisper a single Latin word before each swing. Humanetus. No one knows why. Some think it was a prayer. Others believe it was a final reminder to himself not to become what he wielded. You've started whispering it. To not aloud, just in your breath. Humanetus. Because you're trying to hold on to it, even as the world keeps asking you to let it go. The next morning, you go to the square. You stand there with your blade, ready once again, and for the first time, someone in the crowd doesn't look away. They nod, just once, and though no one else sees it, you carry that moment with you like armor, because maybe, just maybe, they remember a clean cut is still a mercy. It's market day again. You walk through the rows of stalls like you always do, quietly, slowly, watching the way people part like oil from water when you pass. But today, something's different. They don't all part. The tanner nods at Ebrief. Awkward, but unmistakably a nod. A real one. Not the flinch and fade away sort, but the kind a man gives another when he recognizes shared labor, shared filth. You nod back. And then a cobbler's apprentice, no older than 12, eyes wide but curious, not afraid, asks, "Is it true you sharpen your blade every morning?" You pause, then say, simply, "Yes." He smiles like that's the coolest thing he's ever heard, and runs off before his master notices. It's a small shift, but it rattles you more than a swinging crowd. Not because it's threatening, because it feels like something dangerously close to recognition. For so long your role's been shadowed in disgust. You're the ghost with a blade, the stain that walks. But lately, after a noblewoman's grace and a boy's botched death, they've begun to see you as something else, something functional, something necessary, which is worse. You're not sure, because with recognition comes weight. That afternoon, a merchant approaches your door carefully, like he's approaching a cornered animal. He's holding a parcel, wrapped in cloth. "My brother," he says, voice thin, "died. 3 winters ago, executed by another town's man. Badly. I want him reburied with dignity. You stare. I heard you. You don't miss. You don't answer. But you take the parcel. It contains his brother's name, some coins, and a note for the local priest. You're not a gravedigger, but you know where the body was dumped. You know how to carry silence through a burial. You do it that night. No one sees you. No one needs. You mark the grave with a simple stone. Not carved, not grand, just upright. Historians still argue whether executioners ever found redemption through such acts. Some say no, that the role consumed every shred of mercy. Others tell of quiet atonements, anonymous gifts to orphans, graves tended in secret, small rites whispered over bodies no one else would bless. You hope they're true, because you've started doing the same. You whisper things. Now, not just human, other words, names, memories, sometimes apologies. You don't expect forgiveness, but the act of speaking something into the darkness feels like planting seeds in cursed ground. Who knows what might grow? One fringe tale from the Rhine Valley tells of an executioner who, on his deathbed, confessed that he remembered every single name. He had no list, no ledgers, just memory. He said the names came back at night. He'd whisper them until dawn, then fall asleep. You wonder how many you've carried. You try not to count, but the number is always there, somewhere in your hands, somewhere in the way your shoulders curve a little more each season. That evening, you sit by the fire and open your old satchel of blades, not just your axe, the smaller ones, the whetstones, the broken rope fragment you keep, for reasons you don't entirely understand. You start cleaning them, not because they need it, but because you do. And as you work, you notice the silence outside feels different. Not hostile. Just aware. You're no longer invisible. You're still feared, still alone. But now, when people say your name, it's not always as a curse. Sometimes it's just a fact. The man who ends it cleanly. The man who doesn't flinch. The man who buried someone else's dead, even when no one asked him to. You tell yourself that doesn't mean anything. But as you hang your tools back on their pegs, you don't quite believe it, because today, someone looked you in the eye and asked for help. And for the first time in years you said yes. You're called again before sunrise. A young messenger, pale and shivering, stammers out a summons from the priory. It's not a usual request, not even close. There's a man who seeks your blessing. You blink mine. The boy nods. He's to be executed tomorrow, but he asked to see you, not the priest. You've had many requests in your life, most of them unpleasant, but never this. You dress quickly, boots still damp from yesterday's storm, and make the walk through empty streets. The priory, gates creak open like they're reluctant to let you in. The priest doesn't greet. You just gestures toward the back chamber, where the condemned waits in a simple robe, shackled but calm. He looks up. You're him, he says. You nod, unsure what to say. Most don't look you in the eye. I saw what you did, he continues. My cousin, he screamed for 10 minutes when the fire took him. You were the one who ended it. You remember, not his cousin's name, but the face, the cries, the crowd. You stepped in when the method failed, when the horror became too much. You cut the rope that dropped the body, put your blade where the flames couldn't reach. No one thanked you then, but this man remembers. I don't fear dying, he says, but I fear dying badly. I want you to do it, fast. You know how. Your hands tighten around the hem of your coat. You nod again, slowly. This is the closest thing to respect you've received in a long time, and it cuts deeper than any insult. Historians have long debated whether condemned prisoners saw executioners as villains or saviors. Some accounts describe begging for mercy, others, strange gratitude. One 15th century letter from a French prisoner calls his executioner the ferryman to God. You never thought of yourself that way. You still don't, but something stirs in you when the man calls you a cleaner death. You leave the priory in silence. That night, you prepare your tools, as always, sharpening, oiling, inspecting the grain of the axe handle, as if it might reveal some secret. But you move slower, more carefully, because tomorrow, you're not just ending a life, you're keeping a promise. The next morning the square is half full, but quiet. It's one of those cloudy days where the light feels thin, like the sun doesn't quite believe in the day. The prisoner walks without resistance. His head is high, his eyes find yours instantly. You nod. He kneels, places his head where you show him. and he says only one word, "Thank you." You swing once, it's clean, and this time, no one throws anything, no one yells. The crowd just stands there silent, breath held until the guards lift the body away. You don't stay long. You never do. But that one word, "thank you," echoes louder in your mind than any scream ever has. You return home. You sit. You wait for the usual feeling, the ache, the nausea, the too familiar weight of having delivered death. But this time, something's changed. You don't feel lighter, not exactly, but you feel seen. That's new. There's a knock at your door that evening, not a summons, just a knock. When you open it, a woman stands there, older, worn, holding a wrapped bundle in her arms. "You buried my son," she says softly. "3 winters ago. You marked the grave." You nod. The memory surfaces like a ripple in still water. She sets the bundle down. "Bread and herbs, for the pain in your hands. I thought someone ought to bring them." You tried to speak, but nothing comes out. She nods once, and leaves without asking for anything. Fringe tale for the night. There's an old folk tale from Wales about a hangman who was followed by a blackbird after every execution. They said when someone died cleanly, the bird sang once and flew away. When someone suffered, the bird stayed and watched him through the night. You've never seen a blackbird at your window, but tonight, a dove rests on your fence post for hours, unmoving. You tell yourself it's coincidence, but it stays until sunrise, and, for the first time in weeks, you sleep without waking. They send for you from the next village over a routine case. They say a simple hanging, a stable boy who stole from his master's coin chest, then stabbed him in the gut when confronted. "Open and shut," says the messenger, "just needs to be done right." You know what that means. You prepare your gear, make the trek, and arrive to find the scaffold already built hastily. It leans slightly to the left, and the trapdoor is held in place with a rusted latch. You test the release. It sticks out, of course it does. You request oil. The constable shrugs. "We didn't expect ... professionalism." You don't reply. The boy is brought out an hour later, maybe 16, pale, terrified. His wrists are too small for the cuffs. He's barefoot, and the cuffs jangle with every step. You read it in his face immediately. He's guilty, yes, but also a child. The magistrate reads the charges aloud, voice firm, rehearsed. The crowd listens like they're watching a puppet show. You glance at the boy. He's not crying, not begging. He's just stunned. Like he hasn't caught up with his own choices yet. You adjust the rope, then pause. "Can I speak to him?" The guards blink. The magistrate frowns. "Why?" "I want to be sure he understands." They hesitate, then step back. You kneel, slightly, close to the boy. "Do you know why this is happening?" you ask. He nods. "Because I was hungry." His voice is a whisper, not angry, just empty. You pull the hood over his head before the crowd can see his face twist. You do it clean, quick, because that's all you can give. That night, you don't return home right away. You stay in the village, sleeping in the stable loft, among straw and the gentle breath of horses. No one offers you a room. You didn't expect one, but in the morning, a stable hand leaves a mug of warm cider beside your blanket. No note, number, words. Just cider. That's more than you usually get. Historians still argue whether executioners developed empathy for the condemned. Some say the work hardened them beyond feeling. Others insist it created more feeling, raw and buried. But there are journals, scattered letters, a few recorded confessions from late in life. They paint a portrait of men who carried every name, every scream, every final glance like links in a chain they couldn't remove. You believe the second view now. You carry them. You see them when you close your eyes. One fringe story out of Saxony tells of an executioner who refused to hang boys under 18. He'd stand silent, arms crossed, until someone else took the rope. They never did. Eventually, towns just stopped asking. You're not in Saxony, and you don't have the luxury of refusal, but you can still make it quick. Back home, you find a note slipped under your door, a child's handwriting, crooked, uncertain. "Thank you for being kind to my brother." No name, just that sentence. You sit down. Your hands tremble, not from fatigue, but from the sudden, overwhelming ache of being seen again. You've long accepted that kindness isn't your job, but it hurts, doesn't it? That the only way you can offer it is through the blade. You light a candle for the boy, not because it changes anything, but because it's all you can do. The cat curls beside you. The house is warm, quiet, familiar. You think, maybe, just maybe, you're not losing your soul. Not completely, not yet. The letter is sealed in violet wax, which means royalty. You break it open with a familiar dread, a noble execution, high-born blood, velvet ropes, embroidered cloaks, and expectation. So much expectation. You're not unfamiliar with these. When nobles die, it's not just justice, it's theatre. And the director, always you. The letter is formal and flowery. Her Grace Lady Isolde of Wessingshire, convicted of treason most foul, shall be executed in accordance with her station. Executioner, to provide discretion, dignity, and ceremonial precision. Attendance, mandatory. You pack your best tools. There's no room for error here. Royal executions are carefully curated performances. They are choreographed to the second. The condemned's dress is chosen by a court seamstress. A priest blesses the scaffold. Even the executioner, you must adhere to protocol. No hoods, no sudden moves, no mess. You travel by guards and a scribe. Along the way, no one speaks to you. They don't need to. You're not the guest. You're the instrument. When you arrive, the grounds are immaculate. Garden hedges trimmed into peacocks. Fountains sighing gently. The scaffold, draped in white dot, not for purity, but for contrast. The red shows better that way. They give you your outfit: pressed tunic, dark gloves, black boots polished to mirror shine. Your tools are inspected, wiped again, even oiled by someone else's servant. Your axe is approved like it's a royal guest. You're shown to your quarters. You don't sleep. You practice your stance in the mirror, the angle, the grip, the motion, because the crowd at a noble execution isn't a mob, it's a court, and courts remember. The next morning, you walk past gardens full of lilies and lords. Everyone speaks in hushed tones. Ladies clutch lace fans to pale faces. A bard tunes his harp. Yes, there's music. Lady Isolde stands in the center of the white-draped platform, unbound, proud. Her gown is deep blue. Her lips are painted. She turns to you and smiles. "I hear you don't miss," she says. You incline your head. They say that's mercy, but it's also elegance, isn't it? You say nothing. You don't have the words. She kneels without prompting, hair swept aside. The priest steps forward with a brief blessing, quick, for fear of appearing too sympathetic. A clerk reads her charges with theatrical flourish. You raise your axe slowly. The silence is immense. Everyone watches. You swing. One stroke, her head falls forward, the blood soaking into the white like ink on parchment. No gasp from the crowd. No screams, just a ripple of satisfaction. The act is complete. A page turned. You clean your blade with silk. Someone else hands it to you. Then you bow. Yes, bow. That's the tradition. Historians still debate whether executions of nobles were truly more dignified or simply more heavily staged. Some say it was about honor. Others argue it was reminding the people that even high birth bows to the blade. You don't care much for either answer. You just know the crowd didn't blink. That evening, at the post-execution supper, no, really, you are not seated, but you are acknowledged. A toast is raised to precision and duty. You are nodded at by a baron. A baron. You're allowed to eat afterward, alone in the kitchen. But the food is hot. Real meat, spiced wine. You eat slowly, tasting each bite like it's foreign. A servant girl places a coin purse beside you. From her, she whispers. You open it later. Inside is not gold, but a single sapphire. Cold, smooth, sky dark. You carry it home. You don't know what to do with it. It feels more like a farewell than a gift. A fringe story from England tells of a noblewoman who kissed her executioner on the cheek before her death. She said, "You will be the last man to touch me." He cried for 3 days. You did not cry, but something about Lady Isolde's gaze still rests in your mind. Not fear, not hatred, just understanding. And that's the hardest thing to forget. You place the sapphire in a box, on your shelf, not for value, just for memory. Because for a moment you were not just the blade, you were seen. It's been a quiet week. No executions, no trials, no middle-of-the-night knocks, no urgent scrolls pressed into your hand like they might burn. And yet, the stillness weighs more than the work. You've sharpened your axe twice, cleaned your boots 3 times, repaired the worn grip on your knife hilt, even though it didn't need it. You've walked the perimeter of your cottage until the path in the grass looks like an old scar. You're not restless, you're just unused. People like you aren't meant to be idle. So when the magistrate's runner finds you on the third day, you feel something you don't expect. Relief. And then you hear what he says. It's not a name, it's not a trial, it's a summons to discuss compensation. Compensation. You don't say anything out loud, but the word hangs in your mind like a foreign object. You follow the runner to the hall, where the magistrate sits behind a long desk. His robe is too fine for his station, and his fingers twitch like a man. Unused to being nervous, he clears his throat. Your services are appreciated, he says. You blink. That almost sounds like praise, but complaints have been made. That your presence in the market discourages commerce. That your home is too close to the well. That your proximity to the living is unsettling. There it is, the polite version of you're bad for business. So they offer you compensation, not as reward. As encouragement to relocate your house farther from the square, perhaps near the swamp, or the old tannery, somewhere people don't have to see you and be reminded of how fragile their necks are. You don't respond right away, because you already knew this was coming. Historians still argue how widespread these pushes were. Some towns formalized the isolation, assigning executioners homes on the outskirts, even labeling their doors. Others simply made life unbearable until the executioner chose to leave. A quiet exile in everything but name. You ask one question: will the scaffold be moved? The magistrate blinks. Of course not. Of course not. You move bodies where, they say, but you must live where they don't see you do it. They want your services, not your presence, so you accept. What else can you do? They assign you a plot past the fields near the edge of the old woods. The house is small, drafty, half-rotted. You fix it. You always fix things. It keeps your hands from remembering too much. You dig a well nearby. Plant herbs that grow better where blood has been spilled. The cat moves with you. Of course it does. But something has changed. The walk to town is longer now. When you arrive for executions, the crowd is already assembled like a play started without you. When you leave, there's no conversation, no errands, just distance. Even the children don't throw stones anymore. You have become an absence. Fringe detail. In some areas, executioners had to carry bells like lepers, not for health, but for warning, a signal. He's coming. You haven't been asked to do that, not yet, but you wonder how close they are. That night, you walk through your new yard. The moon hangs low and pale, like an eye that doesn't blink. You think about the land you stand on. How many graves beneath? How many lives altered by the swing of your arm? And yet, here you are. Uncelebrated. Unwanted. You reach into your pocket and feel the weight of the sapphire from Lady Is, still cold, still heavy. A reminder that even the highest blood expected you to vanish afterward. You don't curse them. You don't wish revenge. You just continue. You sharpen the axe, mend your boots, keep the fire lit, because someone must, and even if they push you to the very edges of the map, you'll be ready when they call again, because they always do. You're called back to town under strange circumstances. No trial, no criminal, no condemned body waiting for your precision. Instead, it's a council meeting. They don't usually invite you to such things. Most times, they act as if you live underground and only emerge to sharpen blades and silence sinners. But today, they need you to explain yourself. Not for a mistake, for a story. Someone's been spreading tales. They say you took money to spare a man, that you forged a confession, that you botched an execution intentionally. All untrue. But truth matters less than murmurs. And this town, it's built on whispers like yours, is built on bones. You stand in the council chamber, damp from the morning rain. Your boots leave mud on the polished floor. No one offers you a chair. They sit in a half circle, like gods auditioning their next thunderbolt. Where were you 3 nights ago? One asks. At home, you say. Alone. Another chimes. You don't answer. They press harder. Did you know the merchant's cousin? Did you argue with the bailiff? Did you ever speak with the prisoner whose sentence was mysteriously delayed? You want to scream, but you've learned that silence can be louder, so you let it hang. The priest in the corner doesn't meet your eyes. The scribe scratches with his quill. The air is thick with accusation, dressed in perfume. And finally, the mayor speaks. We cannot allow this office's sacred duty to be clouded by questions. You almost laugh. Sacred. The same people who pushed you to the edge of the woods. Now talk of your work like it's holy. You're dismissed after an hour of not being believed, not being defended, and not being heard. No one arrests you. No one exonerates you. You're simply let go. But now, the air around you crackles. You are no longer just feared. You are suspected, and suspicion is a faster poison than hatred. Historians still argue how much protection executioners had when politics turned against them. Some were treated as tools discarded when rusty. Others became pawns, scapegoats, or sacrificial symbols when towns needed someone to blame. There are cases where executioners were tried for soul crimes, a vague category meaning whatever people needed it to. You know how close you came today. A breath, a blink, a rumor too well placed back home. The path to your door feels colder, narrower. You check your windows, your locks, not out of fear, but readiness. They want to believe you're corrupt, because then they can rid themselves of the guilt. If you're broken, then the machine is clean. Later that week, you receive a visitor. It's the woman whose brother you buried, the one who brought bread and herbs. She doesn't speak right away, just stands in your doorway, watching your face, searching for something. They say things. She says finally, you nod. I don't care. She adds, I know what you did for him. You nod again. She leaves a jar of honey on your shelf and disappears into the mist. It's the smallest thing, but right now, it's everything. A fringe story from Lombardy tells of a hangman who was accused of witchcraft after a series of executions coincided with bad harvests. He was burned in the same square he'd once worked. The rope used to tie him, his own. You sometimes wonder how many steps stand between you and that kind of end. You keep your tools ready. You clean them twice as often now. You stop sleeping in your bed. Just a few nights preferring a chair by the door with one hand on the knife. Because if they come, it won't be to ask questions. It will be to end the question that is you. And still, you stay. Because the work doesn't stop. And even when they doubt youth, they'll need you again. The call comes not from a bailiff, nor a magistrate, but from the abbot. That's new. You're summoned to the monastery just outside town. High stone walls, mossy archways, and quiet corridors that smell of beeswax, ink, and incense. A place where men speak to God and pretend not to hear the cries from the scaffold. But now they want you. You leave your tools behind. You instinctively reach for your axe, then pause. It would be wrong to carry steel into such a place, wouldn't it? Or maybe, not wrong, just unnecessary. You walk through the cloister in silence. The monks pass like smoke. Some turn their heads. Others bow slightly, unsure whether to bless you or fear you. You are led to the abbot's chambers. He's old, pale. He's seen things, though probably not the kind you have. He offers you a seat. That's your first surprise. You've killed many men, he says softly. You nod. And now, he says, I want you to save one. You say nothing. A young monk, he explains. Accused of heresy, a heated sermon, misquoted scripture, too many questions. He sighs. The bishop has issued a death sentence. But the boy is not wicked, just misguided. Your mouth is dry. And what do you expect me to do? You ask. The abbot leans forward. Say he confessed. You blink. Say you heard it. Say you witnessed it under the rules of interrogation. Say his soul is clean. You realize, no, you're not here to perform a task. You're here to bend the truth. They don't need your blade today, they need your name. Because the town may shun you, but they trust your word. Isn't that strange? You've always been the one who delivers the sentence. Now they want you to rewrite it. Historians still argue whether executioners had any real say in the fates of the condemned. Some think you were merely handstools moved by other men's orders, but scattered records hint otherwise, of executioners, swaying judgments, confirming confessions, testifying to readiness or lack thereof. And if your word carries weight, then so does your silence. You sit with the abbot a long time. He offers you water. He doesn't pressure you, just waits. You think about the boy. You ask to see him. You're led to a small room, stone walls, narrow window, no bed, just a bench. He's seated there, eyes red but not crying. He sees you, straightens. You expect him to plead. Instead, he asks, is it painful? You pause. No, you say, not if done properly. He nods. Then I will not run. You sit beside him. He does not flinch. Do you believe, he says, that a man can sin by speaking too freely? You don't answer, not because you don't know, but because you know too well. And then, without prompting, he confesses. not to heresy, but to doubt, to fear, to the anger of not understanding why the world is the way it is. He speaks with a trembling voice, but no hatred. You listen. You return to the abbot and say simply, "He repents." The abbot closes his eyes. In relief, the bishop signs the pardon the next day. You were not paid. You are not thanked. But when you leave, the abbot presses something into your hand, a simple wooden rosary, worn smooth with years of fingers. For when your burden grows heavier, he says, you carry it home. It hangs now beside your axewood, beside steel, prayer beside silence. A fringe account from 15th century Spain tells of an executioner who kept a ledger not of kills, but of saves. Times he intervened, times he lied, times he stayed a hand, even his own. He was never canonized, but someone carved a cross into his grave. You think of that monk often. You never see him again, but sometimes, in dreams, you hear his voice calm, quiet, asking you the questions you never dare ask yourself. And for once, you're not sure you want to answer. Rain falls in sheets the morning they summon you, cold, unrelenting, the kind of downpour that soaks you to the bone before you've taken 5 steps from your door. You pull your cloak tighter, wrap your tools in oiled cloth, and make the walk into town with your head down. The streets are nearly empty. Even the market has gone quiet. People huddle under awnings, pretending not to see you pass. Today's case is political. You can feel it before they even say the name. The man waiting in the jail isn't a thief, or a killer, or some wandering heretic. He's a scribe, a clerk from the town records office, accused of falsifying documents, shifting taxes, hiding land titles. But that's not what this is about. He knows something. He wrote something. And now, someone powerful wants him gone. Not told the full story. You rarely are. But the way the bailiff avoids your eyes tells you everything. This is a message job, a quiet threat shouted in blood. You ask for the warrant, the proper seal. You've learned when things are delicate, you must make them official. Otherwise, if it turns badly, you'll be the one left swinging. They show it, sealed in green wax, signed by the governor, so it's real, or at least legal. Your lead to the cell. The scribe sits on the floor, barefoot, soaked from the leaky roof. He's muttering, not to you, to the wall. You kneel, not out of kindness, out of necessity. Do you understand why you're here? He looks at you, blinking. Because I used the wrong name. You don't ask what name. You already know it's someone above your reach. I didn't lie, he adds. I just didn't write what they wanted. You nod. It's enough. I suppose it always is. You don't answer. You stand. That evening, there is no crowd, no public display, just a silent courtyard behind the jail, mud sucking at your boots, and one flickering lantern casting long, thin shadows. The guards are quiet. You do it with the rope. Fast, professional. He dies without a sound. When it's over, the guards haul him away like laundry. One mutters, "Poor bastard." You say nothing. Historians still argue whether executioners knew when a sentence was more about silence than justice. Some say you were complicit, others say you were helpless. But some executioners left subtle mark-staining notches on the scaffold rail, coins buried near unmarked graves, symbols scratched beneath floorboards, memorials no one would find unless they knew. You've started doing that, not every time. Just the ones that don't sit right. There's a patch of dirt behind the jail where nothing grows. You take a flat stone and scratch a symbol into it, with your knife 3 lines, slanted like falling rain. You bury it, 1 foot down, just deep enough. He won't be remembered, but he won't be forgotten either. That night, you don't clean your tools. You leave the rope coiled in a bucket, soaked with rain, and sit beside your fire without moving. The storm rattles your shutters, and thunder rolls overhead like drums in a far-off war. You stare into the flame. You think of all the people who were really guilty, and all those who weren't, and how, in the end, your hands don't know the difference. You just followed the seal. Fringe story from Prague. One executioner carved tiny letters into his axe handle for every wrongful death he suspected. When he died, the handle was burned, the ashes scattered in the wind. They say he believed the names would be carried somewhere, they'd be heard. You look at your own axe, you run your thumb along the grain. You wonder, should you start carving, or is silence the only memorial they'll ever get? You don't decide that night. You just sit and let the storm pass through you. The graveyard sits on the far edge of town, where the soil is thick with roots and the headstones lean like tired sentinels. It's quiet. They're so quiet, you can hear the wind slip between the cracks in old marble, like breath through missing teeth. You've come not for a job, but to see the only man who speaks to you. Without flinching, the gravedigger. He's older than you, somehow, worn down to splinters, hands like bark, voice like dry leaves. He doesn't ask questions, never did. When you arrive, he's sitting on a broken stone, smoking something sharp and bitter. He squints at you through the smoke. Busy week? He asks. You nod. He gestures to a fresh hole in the earth. You or me? You glance at the mound of dirt beside it. Not mine. Good, he says, like it's small talk. I already dug 2 for you this year. That's the closest thing to a joke you'll get, and it makes you smile. You sit beside him, say nothing for a while. In a strange way, this man is your only peer. He knows what it means to carry death, not as a blow but as a duty. He buries. What you end? You ask. How many he's laid down this season? Too many. Any names you recognized? Always. That's all he says. Historians rarely speak of the relationship between executioner and gravedigger, but in towns like yours, it was inevitable. 2 men tethered to the same truth. Death is never just a moment. It's a cycle, and someone has to clean up the rest. Sometimes you help him, not out of obligation, not for pay. Just because digging is simple, honest. The soil doesn't whisper, it doesn't scream, it just gives way. You ask him if he ever forgets faces. He shrugs. Not the faces, the voices. And you know what he means. Sometimes you think the bodies are easier to handle than the echoes they leave behind. There's a story from Austria, 15th century, of an executioner and a gravedigger who made a pact. For every innocent man buried, they would plant a tree. The orchard still exists. Locals call it the Grove of Ghosts. You wonder how large your own orchard would be. After an hour of silence, the gravedigger stands and spits into the dirt. Got a child coming in later, he says. Stomach rot. Nothing you could fix. You nod. Still, he adds, you dig cleaner than most men I've met. That, too, is a compliment. You help him finish a small grave in fun-sized. You don't ask questions. Some deaths speak louder when left unsaid. Afterward, he offers you a sip from his flask. It's awful. You drink anyway. When you leave, the sky is turning amber. The town behind you looks small, like a model made by someone who's never touched. Paying, you walk home slowly, boots caked in earth. The cat meets you at the door. You sit on your bench and stare at the fire. Your muscles sore, but your mind quieter. The gravedigger doesn't fear you. He doesn't worship you. He doesn't ask for anything, and that makes him rare. You fall asleep in your chair that night. Dirt still on your hands, warmth still in your chest. No nightmares come, only silence, only soil. It starts with a child's whisper in the market. Don't look at him, he'll steal your breath. A mother pulls her daughter close, scolding her in a hushed voice. But the words spread like a drop of ink in water. You hear them again 2 days later, this time from an old man behind a sack of flour. They say if his shadow crosses your doorstep, someone in your house will die. You don't react. You never do. But the weight of it settles on your shoulders all the same. Superstition is stickier than truth. The townsfolk have always kept their distance. That's nothing new. But now, they speak of you not just as untouchable, but unnatural. You've heard the stories before, of course. Old tales passed down in whispers. The executioner who caused crops to rot, milk to sour, children to wither. The one whose eyes glowed in firelight. The one who never aged. But you'd hoped those myths were dying out. Apparently not. It worsens slowly. A merchant refuses your coins. I'd rather lose a day's trade, he says. A midwife crosses herself. When you pass her on the road, someone carves a symbol onto your gate, 3 slashes, like claws, a warning, or a ward. You scrape it off. It comes back 2 nights later. Historians still debate how deeply executioners were entangled in local superstition. In some places, they were feared as bringers of justice and death, but in others, they were believed to wield dark powers, curses, touches that spoiled wombs, breath that summoned storms. Some cities even forbade executioners from entering churches, not for sin, but for spiritual contamination. You try to shrug it off, but when your cat disappears again for 3 days this time, you wonder. When you dream, you see yourself walking through the square, and every door slams shut, not with anger, but terror. In the dream, your axe weeps. You wake with the taste of iron on your tongue. One night, you hear something outside, a rustling, then silence. You step outside, blade in hand, but it's not a mob, it's a bundle. At your doorstep, wrapped in cloth, lies a chicken with its throat slit. Its eyes are missing. An offering, a threat. You bury it. You don't speak of it. But the next morning, a child throws a stone and yells, which you don't even chase him. You simply turn back inside, close the door, and wonder how long before someone forgets where the line between function and fear truly lies. Fringe lore from Transylvania tells of executioners whose shadows were said to peel from their bodies at night and walk the town alone. People claimed the shadow would visit homes marked for death, that if you woke and saw it at your door, you'd be dead within a fortnight. You don't believe it, but you've noticed your shadow moving strangely, longer in the evening, slower to follow. You light candles in every room, not for fear of spirits, but to remind yourself that light still answers you. And one night, just before sleep takes you, you whisper into the dark, "I am not what they say." It helps, a little, but the next day, no one meets your eye again. You bury your tools in the shed for a few days. You walk to the square and sweep the scaffold just to feel useful. You greet the baker's wife. She doesn't respond. You pass the gravedigger. He nods, and for now, that's enough, because he still knows that you're not cursed. You're just left over from something people would rather forget. The letter is sealed with red wax this time. Red means urgency. You recognize the messenger, the governor's man. Polished boots, no dirt under his nails, a velvet sash too bright for someone who's never dug a grave. He hands you the scroll, like it's infected. Inside, a name, a date, and a location you've never worked before. Not your town, not even your county. An invitation, an indecision, a summons to oversee an execution in a far-off village, where, apparently, no one else would do the job. You've never been called away before. Usually, the condemned come to you. But the letter is clear. Immediate presence required. High crime. Sensitive matter. Your discretion is assumed. You pack your tools with more care than usual. The road is long, the work unclear, and something about the tone of the letter sits in your ribs like a knot. You arrive 2 days later. It's a strange place to clean. The village square is scrubbed, the houses newly whitewashed, but the air feels wrong. The people look at you the way animals do when something unnatural enters the pen. No one meets your eye. No one speaks. The magistrate is waiting. He's young, soft-handed, smiles too much. "We're grateful you came," he says. You nod. He leads you into a building, half courthouse, half church. There, bound and gagged, is the condemned, and for the first time in years, you hesitate. She's no criminal. She's a healer. You've seen her kind before. Herbs, poultices, prayers muttered in twilight. Not a charlatan, just someone who knew more than she should have. "What's the charge?" you ask. "Witchcraft," he says, casual as plum pie. You glance at her. She's not thrashing, not begging, just watching you, calm. You ask for the evidence. "Children, sickened," he says. 2 stillborn lambs, a rash on the priest's hands. "Surely you understand." You don't respond. You've executed thieves, killers, traitors, soldiers, nobles, drunkards, liars, even children, but never someone accused of casting shadows. You ask again, "Where is the confession?" "We'll have it," he replies. "She just needs more time." You feel the bottom drop out of the moment. More time means more pain. They want you to wait, to stand nearby. Make her see the rope and steel, and maybe that fear will wring words from her mouth. But she never speaks. 2 days pass. You eat bread alone. No one looks at you. No one brings you water. On the 3rd day, the magistrate says, "We've decided to proceed." The people need closure. Of course they do. You prep the platform yourself. The wood is warped. The nails are crooked. You wipe down the blade anyway. That morning, a crowd gathers. Not jeering, not screaming, whispering, like they don't want the guilt to echo. The healer walks to the scaffold barefoot. Her dress is plain. She turns once, meets your eyes. She nods. You do not return it. She does not scream. You make it clean. Because even when the crime is fiction, the death should be true. Historians still argue whether most witch trials were driven by belief or convenience. Some towns feared dark magic. Others simply feared women with books. There are records of executioners refusing such tasks. But more often, they just did what was asked, because who would listen if they objected? You bury her outside the village walls. As instructed, no marker, but you leave one. Notch your blade with a line no one will understand. Then you leave. You don't look back. On the road home, the air feels thinner, cleaner. But when you wash your hands, the smell of rosemary and ash still clings. You light a candle that night, not to sanctify, just to remember. You whisper her name, not because it matters, but because someone should. You thought you'd seen everything by now, but nothing prepares you for a mass execution. The letter arrives with double seals, black and red, not just urgent, catastrophic. It names 7 condemned, all from the same village, all accused of banditry, violence, arson, and rebellion, coordinated subversion. The governor's words read, "You know what that usually means. Desperation, dressed in crime. You travel with a full escort, this time 12 armed guards, and a cart full of rope. The town you're headed to was raided weeks ago, then retaliated against, then punished, and now they need the blood to match the parchment. You arrive, and the gallows are already half-built. They didn't wait for you, they just waited for your blade. The accused sit in a row, shackled, silent. You count them again. 7, 3 young men, 2 women, 1 grey-bearded man with blistered hands, and 1 boy no more than 15. You pause. You've executed children before, but this one looks you in the eye, doesn't blink. The mayor meets you at the scaffold. They plotted against the taxman, he says. Tried to set fire to the archives. One of them bit a priest. You raise a brow. Justice must be swift. He adds, "Of course it must, because delay leads to questions, and questions lead to truths." You ask for confessions. They give you one, handwritten, signed by an official, neatly inked, almost to neat. You know forgery when you see it, but you say nothing, because justice is not yours to define, just to enact. Historians still argue whether executioners at mass events held any power to refuse. Some records show rare cases of protest refusals to execute the very young or the very clearly innocent, but such defiance usually ended with one more name added to the list. You've lived long by knowing when to speak and when to cut. The next morning, the village gathers, children on shoulders, wives clutching rosaries, a priest murmuring too fast to be understood. You prepare the scaffold. 7 NOOSES. 7 drops. You go over the order carefully. The old man first, the boy last. That's their decision, not yours. Still, it feels cruel. You steady your breathing. You begin. Each step follows the same rhythm. Lead them up. Place the rope. Step back. Nod. The trapdoors drop like punctuation marks, and when it's done, the crowd does not cheer. They exhale as if something tight in their chests has finally given way. You help cut the bodies down after. The guards are clumsy. You do it gently, with practice. One of the women's shoes slips off. You tuck it into her belt before you lower her. The boy is light. He has a scar on his hand, half-healed, maybe from climbing trees. You try not to look at his face, but you fail. You bury them all beyond the village fence. No names, no rights, but you leave a pebble for each one. 7 smooth stones. 7 weights you cannot shake. A fringe account from Brittany tells of an executioner who refused. A mass hanging. He vanished overnight. They say he left a poem nailed to his door. If I must be the blade, let me cut only lies. No one ever found him. You return home with sore hands and a tighter jaw. That night, you sharpen your axe, even though it doesn't need it. The blade gleams to clean. You whisper the boy's name, even if you only imagined it. Then you sleep, and dream of gallows swaying in the wind, not with death, but with questions no one will ask aloud. The snowfall begins early this year. Thin flakes at first, then heavier, coating the woods in white silence, muting the roads, frosting the thatched roofs, until the town looks like a painting. Everything feels still, suspended, as if the world has paused to inhale. You haven't been called in weeks. No crimes, no trials, just snow, and for a time it's peaceful. You keep your axe indoors, not from fear, but rust. You feed the fire with more care. Patch your boots. Hum an old lullaby you haven't thought about in years. And then, just as your fingers begin to forget what the weight of a blade feels like, they come. Not the magistrate, not a runner. The bishop. In person. He arrives at your door wrapped in furs, his cross heavy and cold against his chest. Behind him, 2 clerics with blank faces and pristine hands, the kind that don't carry wood or water. He steps into your home like he owns the walls. Executioner, he says. not as greeting but statement. You nod. There is a man, he says, accused of heresy, a priest, one of ours. But the charges are grave, denying the holy fire. Speaking of visions, he claims, the angels told him to refuse the tithe. You say nothing. We've held him quietly. The bishop continues, but word is spreading. He must be silenced, and publicly. You're not surprised, but what does surprise you is this: they want him burned. You haven't done that in years, and not without a trained team. Burning is spectacle, loud, messy. It feeds on fear, and this, you realize, isn't about justice. It's about control. You ask, why not a hanging? The bishop's face hardens, because hanging leaves bones. You feel the weight of that. Some crimes, they don't want buried, they want erased. Historians still argue whether burnings were favored for their symbolism or their severity. Some believed fire purified, others simply found it useful. Lashes don't testify. In some cities, only executioners trained in flame doctrine were permitted to light the pyres, a strange mix of butcher and priest. You ask for 2 days. Notice, he grants you one. You travel that night to the outskirts of town, where the priest is held. He's middle-aged, eyes sunken, but not afraid. Will it hurt? He asks softly. You pause. Yes, he nods. Then I'll scream. Not from fear, but to prove I'm still alive. That, somehow, is the cruelest part. You prepare the site yourself. Dry wood, clean kindling. You soak the ropes in vinegar so they won't snap too soon. It's a gruesome calculus. Too tight, the flames won't rise fast enough. Too loose, he'll fall and die too quickly. They want it visible. You hate yourself for knowing how to do this. On the morning of the square fills early. Snow falls as the crowd gathers. White and fire don't belong together. But today, they meet. The priest has walked to the pyre in silence. He blesses the crowd, not with sarcasm, with compassion. That's when you feel it doubt, like a nail in your chest. But your hands move. They always do. You light the fire. The wood catches fast. He screams. As promised, the people watch. Some cry, some cheer, and one child throws a snowball that vanishes in the heat before it lands. When the fire dies, the bishop steps forward. Thus ends the poison. He says, you say nothing, you do your job. But later, alone in the snow, you gather what ashes you can. You wrap them in cloth. You walk to the old grove beyond the graveyard and bury them beside the roots of a hollow tree. No marker, just memory. A fringe tale from northern France tells of an executioner who buried ashes from a burning in jars, sealed them with wax, and hid them inside a cathedral wall. Years later, the wall was torn down and the jars found still warm. You wonder if the story is true. You wonder if fire remembers. You return home as the snow thickens. Your coat smells of smoke. Your hands ache. You sit beside the fire and stare into the flames. They crackle like bones. You whisper, not a prayer, but a question. Am I still a man? There is no answer, just heat and silence. You wake before dawn. No summons, no knock at the door. Just the stillness of a world blanketed in frost, and a silence so complete, it feels like the earth itself is holding its breath. And in that silence, something clicks inside you. You're done, not out of fear, not guilt, just tired, the kind of tired that settles into your bones like winter, slow and final. You don't pack. There's nothing to bring. Just a walk through your own house, touching familiar things one last time. The notch in the table from your first blade, the water stain near the hearth, the hook where your cloak always hung. You trace your fingers across them like farewells. The axe stays on the wall. Let them find it when they need it, because they will need it, but it won't be your hands anymore. Outside, the sky bruises pink with morning. You take the back road, the one few use. It winds past the stream, past the gravedigger's cabin, past the old stones no one visits anymore. You pause at his fence. He's there, shoveling snow, going somewhere. He asks. You nod. Don't leave it to clean, he says, not unkindly. They'll think you are never real. You almost smile. Then you walk, no destination, just away. Historians still argue what happened to some executioners who vanished. Some say they were hunted down. Others, that they changed names, became monks, joined distant wars. A few claim they walked into the forest one day and simply kept going. The town will talk, of course. They'll whisper. Some will say you ran. Some will say you went mad. Some will say you were called to hell to serve a darker master. Let them, because you know the truth. You were not cursed, you were used, and you survived longer than most. Maybe one day, they'll remember you with a trace of decency. Maybe not, but you'll remember the ones who couldn't speak for themselves, and that will be enough. You cross the ridge by noon. Behind you, the rooftops shrank into the horizon. You don't look back again. The world ahead is quiet. You step into it, one foot after the other. Still a man, still breathing, still free. And now, as the journey ends and your breath settles into the hush of night, you feel it, don't you? That slow melting of tension, like snow slipping off a roof at last. The fire has died down. The town sleeps oblivious, forgetful, always hungry for the next name, but not you. You saw what lay behind the mask. You walked the scaffold with weary feet. You carried the weight not of the blade, but of the silence that followed it. And through it all you remained human, bruised, yes, hardened, but not hollow. Even now, as the chill of medieval frost gives way to the warmth of your own blanket, you carry something rare called perspective. You understand that justice was never clean. That power hid behind robes and coins, not truth. You, in your quiet way, remembered names that were meant to be erased. So rest easy now. Let the fog roll in and soften the edges of the past. No more crowds, no more blood, just the rustling of old leaves in your memory and the flicker of a long-doused flame. You are not alone. You never were. Now close your eyes. Let the breath slow. Let your hands relax. The axe is far away. The snow is falling gently again, and dawn is still hours off. Good night. Traveler. Sleep deep. Sleep clean. Sleep free. End of script. Sweet dreams.